Ladies and gentlemen, is it only with me, or do you recognize that situation in which you open the fridge and you're looking for something, let's say the butter, and you don't see it, and then you ask your wife and your wife is coming over and she points to it? The butter in this case is right in front of my eyes all the time and I didn't see it. And then we get this little exchange, always like, I'm a stupid man. I don't see things that women do see. And I know it's a little bit dangerous to make that kind of remarks these days because we're all equal, but that's what happens with me. But that's also what happens oftentimes. I have the impression when scholars, researchers, academics write about tempo, and especially when they write about the insane, incredibly fast, if not impossible tempi that composers like Beethoven, Chopin, Schumann, and many others left. As for instance, Marten Noorduin, who published in 2013 already this article, Czerny's Impossible Metronomisation. We're going to go through this article and we're going to read some paragraphs together, have some illustrations of this, and also I'm going to get to the point where I explain the title of the video, that if all of this is true, then Beethoven must have hated Bach. And also, another thing, stick to the end of the video, because this is one of the rare instances where you have an article published by an academic scholar that acknowledges, in fact, the problem, that there is an insurmountable, unexplainable problem related to metronomisation. Noorduin should deserve all the credit for having displayed, for having just positioned that issue, that the fact that these metronomisms really are impossible, maybe for the first time, not for the first time in history because other people were before him, but in an academic position. It's very telling, however, that a few years later, when he published his doctoral thesis, Beethoven's tempo indications, that in the entire work there is no sign, no trace anymore of the fact that many of these metronomisms, if not the majority, are flat out impossible or at the bare minimum make no sense. So that's very telling. But at least in 2013, when he was still knocking probably on the door of the academic world to be accepted as one of them, that was still giving him an opportunity to write openly about this. So that's very interesting. But the plot twist at the end of this video will be something that you will be thinking of when you watch this video till the end, and tonight you're brushing your teeth in front of the mirror, you will be still thinking of the solution that is given by Marten Noorduin. And I have to be honest, if I were in his position to write about metronomisms and to try to solve the apparent problem from a single beat perspective, then I would not know any other solution than this. So as ridiculous it may seem, it's maybe the only solution that they still have left. But before we do that, I will take you through parts of this article. We're going to have, of course, some audio fragments. And as you all love me showcasing audio fragments, speeding them up until we reach the modern reading of the metronome, which is single beat, I will do that as well. So there we go. So the focus of this article is, as the title implies, Czerny's Impossible Metronomisation. And as I said in the introduction of this video, Noorduin, is one of the first official academic scholars that really flat out makes the case for the metronomisms to be just impossible. And he's doing that in a very firm and non-apologetic, if that's good English, way. So, for instance, he starts by talking about Czerny's own compositions, Beethoven's, the metronomisation he gave for Beethoven, but also the edition that he made for J.S. Bach's work. So Czerny's editions of Johann Sebastian Bach works for keyboard were the most complete and important at the time of publication. By the way, that's true. Even someone like Frédéric Chopin, he copied manually, like hand copied the indications that Czerny gave in his Bach edition into the scores of his pupils. Not only the metronomisms, not only the accentuation, but also the crescendo, decrescendo, and all the signs that Czerny added to Bach's work. So that's the position that Karl Czerny had in that time. And what is really interesting is that in the Bach edition by Czerny, Czerny claimed, as Noorduin says, they were claimed to be at least partly based on Beethoven's playing. But the editor's opinions also had a lot of influence in the editing process, obviously. That's, by the way, true. So when we play Bach from Czerny's edition, and we look at not only the way he is like adding all kind of dynamic signs, articulation signs, which originally were not there in Bach's edition, of course, in Bach's public, whatever music was published in Bach's time, let's say in Bach's autographs, nor by his students. All these things are added, but we hear partly the voice of Beethoven. Czerny, most important student of Beethoven, and also one of the persons, probably we still forget that today, and we keep forgetting that today, one of the persons that was closest to Beethoven throughout his entire life. And so it's even more, we're going to have a look at Bach's a little prelude, the ones that he published or composed for probably his sons. And in the edition that Czerny made for these pieces, also the Bach inventions, by the way, he writes, La disposition de cette composition indique assez que l'intention a été de réunir en un seul volume les œuvres faciles de Jean-Sébastien Bach. So in English, this says that the goal of this edition was to bring together all the pieces by Bach that you could say like are the easy parts, the easy pieces by Bach. So that will be something to remember. But Noorduin, he continues, and the introduction is very interesting. Again, like we have to upload the fact that he really called the metronome marks for what they were, or are, being impossible. So he continues, Czerny's metronome marks for both his own works and for Bach have been criticized in modern times for being almost impossible to play due to their high speed, an instance of which can be seen in example 1. So one thing I have to say before we're going to have a look at example 1 is that you will, although Noorduin is here saying like, okay, we have metronome marks, guys, let's not keep turning circles around this. They are impossible, and we should find an explanation for them. Though you will rarely hear him using the word like, it is really impossible, it's almost impossible. Now it's flat out impossible. Example 1 that he gives is ending all of the discussion. So this is the example he gives, and what he writes about this is this. While bar 24 with demi-semiquavers in the right hand at a speed of 552 notes per minute seems to be realistically performable. By the way, that's close to 10 notes a second. Also, I wonder why giving a speed per minute that doesn't reflect anything, that doesn't resonate with readers. But if you say 10 notes a second, it is not 10 notes a second, but very close, then you can start realizing like, okay, 10 notes per second. Everybody you can have a second. You can even have a stopwatch if you want, and just tap 10 notes on your desk, not even play on the piano. So that's insanely high. Though he says realistically performable, I have to say a professional pianist, they can do that. The next bar is much less so. During the first 3 beats of bar 25, the demi-semiquaver sextuplets are supposed to be played at the speed of 828 notes per minute. By the way, 828 notes per minute, those are these 30-second triplets or sextuplets. They would go in a speed close to 14 notes per second. Just try that. Just try to imagine that. But then he continues. During the last beat, with 10 notes in the right hand for every quaver in the left hand, the speed increases to an improbably fast 1380 notes per minute. 1380 notes per minute are 23 notes per second. So an improbably fast, that is like academic wording for this is flat out impossible. But if I write it like that, then my solution that I have to come up with is bears even more weight, because what can you say? Okay, let's continue. Because of these technical demands, and perhaps also because of the sometimes poor musical content in these works, Chinese edits have not been recorded. That's an important point for him, because he will be looking for recordings that like how musicians deal with this. And the few recordings that have been made, the suggested speeds are at best approached and only attained in a few pieces. Well, footnote number 7 points to the recording by Skotzolai, I don't know how to pronounce that, Carl Czerny piano works, and there are some fragments on YouTube, which is true. We're going to listen to these and then also see what happens if we speed them up, because Noorduin points here, for instance, to number 39, For instance, it's played at a speed of around 80 notes, 80 quarters per minute, while Czerny indicates 104. By the way, before we do that, can I just ask the question very quickly, like, if the speed is attained only in a few pieces, why not just point to those pieces? I mean, we are, like, from a single beat perspective, you are looking for like a solution. Let's be honest, Marten Noorduin is looking for a solution, but if you say like the speed is attained in a few pieces, well, which are they? I would really love to see that. So only pointing to a piece where the speed actually is not reached, and by far, like 80 to 104 is quite a lot. That's just a question that I have, but it's maybe just me. So let's have a look at number 38 and number 39 that I downloaded from YouTube in order to also be able to give you the impression what a single beat performance would sound like. So 38 is this etude. That sounds in a performance by Sokolai like this. And before you start commenting in the comment section, like, I know I have a few wonderful fans that say like, "Yo, this is all possible. You see, I mean, pianist, and he could do faster if you want." Yeah, okay, trust me, if these people who record Czerny etudes could do faster, they would go faster. So let's not telling jokes to ourselves. But this is obviously too slow. We are in a tempo closer to 70 than to 84, which is already remarkably fast. Again, this performance is really top-notch. This is top virtuosity. And if you don't believe me, just sit at your piano and try it for yourself. It is something that the speed we just heard is only for the happy few, you know, the top 1% of musicians today. But Czerny doesn't write 70 or 72, he writes 84. So let's listen how that would sound. This is sped up in single beat. And before also you start thinking like, okay, but on the Viennese piano, this guy plays on the Stein. Yes, I know. Passages like these, you will not be able to play them on the Viennese pianoforte like this. That you have to lean into the key, even in the slower, the real performance, so to say, in order to make them work. You don't have the time to go up really out of the key and then go back, which is something you have to do on a Viennese piano. They don't have an aftertouch. These pianos do not have a double escapement. Okay, let's go on to number 39, which in Sokolai's version sounds like this. So that's a piece that Noorduin talks about here. That's played around 80 instead of 104. There we go. Okay, same remark. This is really impressive. I mean, just try it for yourself. Just even if you say like, I'm not on that level, I shouldn't try. Just try it. Just experience how fast this is. But now we go to a speed that's a little bit faster. So 104, I'm speeding this up, obviously, and then you get to this result. What is also worth mentioning is that the Opus 299, this is of course at the very end. So the Opus 299 has 40 etudes, starts with relatively easy and of course builds up, but this is by no stretch of the imagination in the work of Karl Czerny, the most difficult works. So the first etude of this very famous bundle is this one. So that is really something that's not so difficult. And also when you go into 19th century sources, and this was a very popular bundle of etudes in the 19th century as well as in the 20th century, and probably even today. It got less and less attention, obviously, because of the insane speeds, so to say, which is, of course, not the case. We have to have these metronome marks. You know that in our whole beat metronome practice. But these etudes were, the first 20 were described as for like the beginners. Not beginners, obviously, the first lessons, but for like not advanced virtuosos, and yet the speed that Czerny requires here is 14 notes per second. Okay, let's continue here. We come back on that. So the extreme velocities demanded in example 1 are not an exception, and similar speeds can be found in many other etudes by Czerny. That's true, by the way. This leads one to believe that from the point of view of a modern piano pedagogue, these works confront students with almost unrealistically high expectations. That's a very important and a quote, and that should deserve much more attention also in this article. And unrealistically high expectations, what Noorduin does here is he says like, okay, Czerny, when he marks these works with these tempi from a modern perspective, like today, day and age, like we are now in a world 200 years further than Czerny, we would never in a million years demand these speeds from piano students. It doesn't make any sense. They're unrealistically high if we have those expectations. Of course, the caveat will be, if you apply the whole beat, still they will be difficult, but they are not any longer unrealistically high. And then we come to Bach. Works by other composers which Czerny edited show that the fast, unreasonable tempos do not exclusively occur in the purely didactical works. This is a very important remark as well, because that's 100% true. And then he continues, Noorduin, figure 1 illustrates the tempo that Czerny recommends for the first of J.S. Bach's Kleine Präludien. That's a C major here. Everybody knows that. Even though the tempo suggestion for this prelude seems to fall within the realm of physically possible tempos for well-trained virtuosos, that's to be seen, but yeah, I get this point. For almost every other pianist, simultaneous close adherence to the articulation in the metronome mark would be very challenging. Again, that's scholar language, very challenging, flat out impossible. What he's saying here is when you would really want to apply all the fingerings, the articulations, and the metronome marks, that would be actually impossible. And this would explain why all of the recordings surveyed for this article, the fastest performance is still significantly below Czerny's speed. For young students, for one, the editor claims that Bach's Kleine Präludien were intended. Yes, we've seen that. The suggested speed would be even more problematic. We're going to have a look here. Footnote 8 points to Glenn Gould's performance of this, or recording of this piece, which is apparently the fastest that Noorduin gave. We're going to have a listen to that. Also there, I'm going to apply the single beat rendition. But it's very important here, just for a moment. So we have Czerny, who publishes the easy works by Bach. Nothing wrong with that. We have the Kleine Präludien, we have also the inventions, and then symphonias. You could say that symphonias already are not so easy, but we get his point. And especially the Kleine Präludien, they are made for beginners. They are made for Bach's sons, you know, and they are metronomized in a way, and that's Noorduin's point. Why do you metronomize these works like this when your target audience, so to say, with this music is beginners? It gets crazier than that. If we go to Glenn Gould's performance of this, I'll just pull up like a short fragment. And I pulled up a score from IMSLP very quickly here from by a guy named Arthur Adolf Ruthart. It's interesting to see the metronome here between brackets. Of course, I don't know the history, but it's not far below Karl Czerny, so obviously that's also a whole beat metronome mark. So let's listen to Glenn Gould, and then of course I will speed that performance also up until we reach 132. So here's your original version. So already, I don't know if you've noticed that, but Gold doesn't play all these ornaments. He leaves them out. And if you go back to Noorduin, his comment here is like, okay, when you do all of that, then it will be very challenging. The articulation and to close adherence to the articulation and metronome mark, but also the ornamentation, as we can see that Glenn Gould already in a tempo of 106, and we are not talking about 112, we are talking about 132 by Czerny. Well, to leave that out. So, but now let's just do the exercise that you all love and speed this recording up to we reach 132. There we go. I recommend everyone who is teaching, who has a beginner, so short preludes for beginners, like it, of course, who is able to play this in 132, to send me just a note in the comment or by email. When that happens, so you have a young student just starting, like first year, you have the, okay, he advances well or she advances well, you have the Kleine preludes on the piano, and they're like, he keeps saying like, I want to play faster, faster. You go to 132 and there you have it. Like if you have such a student, just contact me. We will make videos and we will make sure that you become world famous. I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but that of course doesn't happen. That doesn't exist. And yet there is the question. We have now several aspects here in this article where the author says, okay, Czerny's metronomisation, there are some question marks here. Don't think we can play all of that. It's really like highly improbable that we can play or reach these tempi. As for instance, not only the etudes, but for instance also in works that he metronomized that are by Bach. Why? He indicates, he just says in the preface that these works are for beginners. And why would you metronomize this in 132? The question and the thing that keeps popping up in my mind when I read it, it's like what I said at the beginner. You open the fridge and you don't see what you are looking for. And then my wife comes and she says, it's in front of your eyes. That is, of course, very true for these scholars as well. It is in front of your eyes. The 132 quarter note is obviously not the speed in which you play. Yes, the frequency is correct. The metronome equation, the note value is correct as well, of course. But you don't read that metronome mark in the same way as we do today. You read it in a way as many physicists use their pendulum stills to. I mean, it's just a common practice to just say 1, 2, 3. And if you do that, guess what? Then this becomes a very normal tempo. As for instance, in the case of the Bach inventions, I made a whole series on that. 138 for the first one. Guys, if we listen to Gustav Leonhardt, just listen to his recording. I mean, that sounds to all of you just normal. Some people will play it a little faster, some people will even play it a little slower, but this is not 138 quarter note. Gustav Leonhardt recorded this piece in 138 eighth note. I mean, is this a coincidence? Okay, if you really want the result, I can speed this piece up as well. That would result in this. I once had a lecture about this where I used this fragment. And of course, when you talk about Beethoven and you talk about all the other stuff, then people say like, yeah, I mean, this is slow. And then you just show the current practice and you say, yeah, that's like we know it. And then you speed the things up, like, of course, same exercises we do here on the channel. And they're like a little bit like that. But when you do the exercise with Bach, it's very interesting. Every time you speed this fragment up to single beat, Czerny metronomisation single beat, they start laughing. And I say like, the answer is very simple. You're laughing now also with the things that we showed previously, like in the Beethoven, like 138, guys, that's just the speed of the fugue of the Hammerklavier Sonata. And the Hammerklavier Sonata is Allegro 144. If you find this like laughable, then you just accept like 144 and the fugue of the Hammerklavier Sonata is very rarely met either. But these very high speeds, you accept that because you are used to them. You're used to, that's a conditioning. You're conditioned to listen, to hear that music played so fast. But when that's not the case with music that either is unknown or much lesser known, or in the case of music that we still play, as in the case of this invention, like in a more normal tempo, which is Czerny divided by 2, and you do the same exercise, you bring the same Czerny who gives these crazy metronome marks also for Beethoven works, and the crazy metronome marks for his etudes, and so also the crazy metronome marks for Bach works. If you set all of that on a similar line, the Bach works like are laughable. Nobody accepts that. But if this is a problem, then this is also a problem. Then we should also bring this down. The opposite is happening now. It is this information that is pushing the current hip generation, historically informed performance practice people to try to reach those tempi as well. And of course, that's something you cannot say, but it's the only explanation I have. Either not understanding the notation at all, not understanding the origins of the original like middle tempo or tempo ordinario at all, which is the case. I mean, very few people know about that, which is remarkable in a world where people actually go on stage and say like, we are part of this historically informed performance practice domain. And so, dear audience, what you're about to hear now is very well researched. We know what we are doing. Of course, we might have just some marginal things that we have to fix, but overall, the Bach you're here now, all the Brandenburg concerti in 1 hour, that happened apparently. We have patron calls. Some of my patrons said that he attended the concert, all the Brandenburg concerti in less than 1 hour, and they're bragging about it. Why? There's no ground for that. But yeah, Bach is now in the laboratory phase of like suffering from the same like obsession for speed. That's such a 19th century thing that maybe has more affected the people of the historically informed performance practice than any other, because for like, how many times you read in the comments that people say to me, like, you're dogmatic. You take these metronome marks so seriously. How about that's like so unmusical? And do you really think that these people were that strictly? We're going to come back in this video on that, also in regards to Noorduin article. But then people say that's so dogmatic. Don't do that. But if you go the other way around and you see people of the historically informed performance practice speed up Baroque music so much for no reason, well, that's dogmatic because it's based on nothing. Being dogmatic means you believe in something, in this case speeding up for no reason, for the reason itself, or for the reason of speeding up. What we are doing on the channel is we see a metronome mark that doesn't make any sense. We find a solution or whole beat, and we record all the symphonies in whole beat. In Beethoven's tempi in whole beat. And why do we do that? Because Beethoven actually sent messages to us throughout time. You can read that, by the way. His letters are there. His notebooks are there. You can read him saying, I care about that. Find a solution if you need to. And we find a solution. But this, by the way, you can order these. They're still available. This is the Fifth Symphony on vinyl. If you really want to go all in this is perfect audio, but the Fifth Symphony on vinyl, that's like analog recordings. Anyways, let's not go into that territory, but they are available, and therefore they're here on my table, obviously. So what we are doing is not dogmatic. We just take a fact, that tempo is given by Beethoven, we apply that. And when people don't like it, it's because they're conditioned to hear something different. I can promise you, this requires only 10 minutes of your time. You open your mind, you stop thinking about what's right and what's wrong, and this cannot possibly be right. You just sit, you lean back, you listen to whatever symphony you prefer. Go on Bandcamp, I'll put the link in the description. You can listen 3 times for free there, and then you'll have to buy the stuff. I mean, guess what? It's 4 years of work and 15 years of research. Then just 10 minutes of your time. And everything is like what's happening? There is a world opening. But what's happening now in the historically informed performance practice domain is something that is really worrying me. Anyways, let's continue with Noorduin. If we go back to the topic of the video here, Bach, Czerny metronomisation. Czerny says, okay, I used for these metronomizations also what I remember of the playing of Beethoven. Then the only conclusion that you can have is like, okay, when Beethoven really wanted these pieces to be played like that, he must have hated Bach, because there is no music, actually. There's no enjoyable music, or the music is played in a speed that leaves no room for the listener to enjoy what Bach has done. And so obviously that's not the case. Beethoven was a huge Bach admirer. He was educated in Bonn when he was still very young there by Gottlob Neven. Neven is a 3rd generation Bach student. And so, yeah, tradition, you have to always be careful, but there was still the Bach school. We tend to forget that Beethoven belongs to the Bach school. There is a direct line. And Czerny belongs to the Bach school as well. Of course, they interpreted the music in function of their time. And Beethoven probably as well. Though Karl Czerny in the introduction, you will read him saying that, be careful, guys, in Bach's time, an allegro there was not what an allegro was in our time. What we think is an andante was an allegro in Bach's time. And that continues. By the way, that's super interesting. So yeah, Beethoven must have hated Bach when he was really a single beat guy. That's the conclusion. But now we come to the twist of everything, because Noorduin has set this article up in a very cool way. And if you continue reading, he's going to mention some of the explanations, quote-unquote explanation of, like, you can see in his subtitle, the misused metronome, and so on and so on. He talks about the broken metronome, about reading the tempo indication below the rod instead of above the rod. But all these things, he even touches about like the most crazy, and his conclusion is that, the conclusion is that the metronome marks given by Czerny are just correct. There is no such thing. He even mentions briefly Clemens von Gleich, who was actually not a collaborator, also not student, but in the circles of Willem Retze-Talsma, who introduced this variable use of the metronome mark. The variable use of the metronome, which, of course, it's absolutely correct to not accept that, because there is no such thing that the metronome is either used in single beat or whole beat, and there is no such thing of jumping from whole beat to single beat. That doesn't exist. I knew Christoph Clemens von Gleich pretty well, by the way. He died a few years ago. So all of that is like just pushed from the table by him, and for that only he deserves credit. But then, of course, you're left with the question that you have to answer. You have, as a scholar, here's my problem. Doesn't make any sense. Look at Bach's preludes. Czerny, what were you thinking? From a modern pedagogical standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to expect your students to play that Kleine Präludien, this small prelude in 132 quarter note. What were you thinking? And then, of course, in the academic world, you have a problem. You write an article, you do some research, then I must see your solution. And the solution is like, if you read it, and we're going to read it, you could say like, yeah, how crazy. This is stupid. But it is in a way crazy and stupid. But it shows one thing. It's not how stupid Noorduin is, because he's not a stupid guy. He's a very intelligent guy, I can tell you that. What it shows is that we come at the last station. And it happens fast, once you just touch upon the problem, you mention the problem, that metronome marks as a whole do not make any sense. There is no escape anymore. There is no solution left anymore. There is nothing there anymore but to abandon a single beat reading. And of course, that's not what crossed Noorduin's mind. That's maybe not even a possibility he had. And if you do not accept that whole beat metronome practice, well, then you come to this conclusion. So he starts here at the very end of the article. Throughout Czerny's career, he often wrote fast metronome indications, that's an understatement, which, as the evidence indicates, seem to have been treated in more or less the same way they are treated today. That's absolutely not the case. There is no evidence for that. In the entire 19th century, you won't find anything in regards of Czerny's etudes, the Opus 299 or another bundle, in which people complain about the unreachable high tempi. It doesn't exist. So making the assumption is absolutely factually untrue. The fast metronomic indication of Czerny pieces seem to have been considered an avoidable obstacle for those that did not possess the technical abilities to adhere to them. But we made just the case, or the author, Noorduin, that they are impossible. So for no one, not now, not back then, not in the future, these metronome marks in single beat are possible. But how to explain then? Then in Czerny's Opus 299, in the original introduction, Czerny writes that you have to practice these pieces in order to play them in the tempi indicated. The daily exercise is the same thing. Czerny writes in the preface, you practice this and you play that in the tempi indicated. I mean, that's super crucial information left out here. Maybe the author didn't know. I don't know. It's like, okay, but if I know, I'm often criticized like, you're not part of the academic world, you're not a scholar. Where is your peer-reviewed article? Yeah. But I do know that Czerny wrote in those prefaces, you play in my tempo. I do know that Czerny wrote in his pianoforte school, the smallest deviation in time destroys the entire composition. Meaning, you play the piece in the tempo indicated by Beethoven or another composer. Otherwise, you destroy the entire meaning, the setup, the way that this composer actually meant that music to be played, or it was envisioned in his mind. So I do know that, being a non-scholar and a not peer-reviewed author. So if this is peer-reviewed, why is this not mentioned? I'm sorry to be so critical, but I mean, this is the highest level we're talking about. Not criticizing Noorduin per se, but we have to really call things as they are. Then, while the goal of historically informed performance has never been to recreate the performances of 19th century dilettantes, I mean, now we're talking about beginners. Now we accept the fact that this music was written for beginners, like not only the Opus 299, but also the Bach pieces. It's hard to imagine that the findings in this article only apply to them, since adhering to Czerny's metronome marks makes his work so much more difficult than almost everything else that was written at the time, which is not correct. Again, much more difficult, impossible. And Czerny is not an outlier. If you go to music by Kalkbrenner or by Moscheles or by Henri Hertz, I mean, you have so many musicians, composers in that time that left, especially etudes, that are just crazy. Like Czerny also was very difficult. He wrote also pieces for virtuosi and like crazy stuff. But the works that we have seen here in this article are not the most difficult ever written. It's not that Czerny was here and all the others were here. No. Everybody was there. Czerny might have led the way. I mean, it's for a reason that Franz Liszt came out of the school of Czerny. But it's not something, and that's something they try to do, like, okay, but Czerny is a problem, but it's like an isolated problem. No, it's not. Therefore, even on 19th century instruments, we can possibly justify lowering some of these marks slightly without being out of touch with the historical performance practice, as many of Czerny's contemporaries would presumably have done the same. That's a sentence, I mean, I don't understand. understand. Even on 19th century instruments, so assuming that these 19th century instruments somehow miraculously make things easier, which is not the case. I see this in the comment section so many times, saying like, yeah, but the lighter pianos make this all possible. Well, good luck with the Viennese piano. I have 2 of them in my studio, and it's a difficult instrument to play on because, yeah, the action is lighter, but not so much. Not so much compared to an Erard or even to a Steinway. These differences are there, but they are minor. Of course, Viennese piano or the Fritz that we play here, that's like lighter than the Steinway, obviously, but it doesn't have the double escapement. The double escapement makes it basically impossible to even think of playing these works in single beat, even if you could, if our muscular system would allow that. It doesn't. Nerve system, like we cannot play these speeds. We are not designed to do that. But even if we would, then the pianist would say no. The first repeated note, the piano would say no. It's not possible, physically not possible. So why saying that? Why making this suggestion? We can possibly justify lowering some of these marks because many of Czerny's contemporaries would presumably have done the same. How can you say that there are not a few, there are many of Czerny's contemporaries would have done the same, but then say presumably? If you know that there are many of Czerny's contemporaries who would do the same, like lowering the speed compared or in combination, like compared to the metronome mark, I would say, like how, if there are many, then it's not presumably, then you have probably, you have those quotes, right? I mean, how can you write something like many, and connected to presumably? It's either we might expect, we presumably some of Czerny's contemporaries would have done the same thing, but many of Czerny's contemporaries, then you have to give me some names. But you won't get them because there are no names. And again, I'm a little bit hard maybe on Noorduin here, but like partly he deserves the critic here because he knows that there is nothing. And the only reason that I can feel for him here is like in that situation, I mean, he was in 2013 knocking on the door. He was working on his doctoral thesis that he published in 2016, on which we could make a whole YouTube series. So maybe he couldn't write what he really was thinking, but okay. I don't know if your audience is served with that, but many of Czerny's contemporaries would presumably have done the same. No, none of Czerny's contemporaries would have done the same because Czerny marked in his preface, you play the piece in the tempo I marked. We will probably never know for sure if Czerny himself followed his own metronome marks when performing, but there is some evidence that indicates that it just may be possible. No. There is absolutely 0.0000000 evidence that Karel Czerny nor his contemporaries didn't follow the metronome marks given. The opposite is true. There is overwhelming evidence that all of his contemporaries followed the metronomisation, even more that the metronomisation was done for those people. As a tool, the metronome was a tool to reach out to a vast, growing army of amateur players, if you can say it like that, to give them really clues of performance practice. That's how you have to. That's also the reason why so many Instruktivausgaben, like instructional editions, were given. With metronome marks, by the way, in the words of Noorduin, probably you were never like reached or not even like, no, it's the opposite is true. Then he points here to a YouTube video where Leslie Howard played Czerny Opus 299. It's one that's the same that we listened to earlier in single beat. Well, yeah, it's uploaded on YouTube. You can listen to that and make up your own mind if that is really the way he played or not. I would like to see that live, not in a recording, even though there was video. And probably Leslie Howard, I mean, he recorded all of Liszt, can do things that few of us can do. But anyways, that's like, if you have that recording, why not using that at the beginning? It reads like, okay, is there nothing here I can give? But then we come to the conclusion, and this is the really twist of the video. If she's still here again, I'm blessed with an audience. I mean, so many of you. When I made recently the last video, 52 minutes, so many of you just commented like I'm still here. That really is unbelievable. Thank you for that. Leave it in the comments here again. Like, if you're there, mark the minute and I will give you a little heart. Happy to do that. The possibility that Czerny really did play these works at the tempi indicated should therefore not be excluded, which seems to be the most likely explanation for the existence of these indications. Okay, but that's a completely different conclusion now. You first build up like the conclusion that probably many of them, we will never know if even Czerny played his works and the tempi indicated. And now, just because you have a YouTube video where Leslie Howard plays in 1 minute 39 last duration of performance, say, okay, but yeah, maybe the possibility is there that Czerny could all have done that. You know, we should not exclude that. Which seems to be the most likely explanation for the existence of these indications. Yes, of course. I mean, when you give a metronome mark, when thousands of metronome marks are given, guys, we're working on a metronome database and I'm waiting for the day when we can publish that. It's a very complex process. And of course, we work with people that are just willing to volunteer and that just apply their insane expertise to this project. It's a complex thing, a database like that. But once we have that, you will see for yourself how many metronome marks we have from how many authors. It's insane. It exploded in the 19th century. And all of these people would have given metronome marks in order not to follow the tempo indications. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that we have to write an article about that. It just blows my mind. I'm sorry to be, I mean, this is like my weak spot when I read things like this, because it goes in against such like obvious logic. And still, these texts are the ones that are accepted on the highest academic level. And when we come with something like, yeah, but that's like, yeah, whatever. They will not say like we are flat earthers. That's of course not what happens, but we will see. I mean, we're going to do attempts in another direction, and maybe I'm a little bit too critical for everyone. And again, it's not personal on Noorduin. I understand this position, and what I also do understand is that you might have the impression like, yeah, but how can they know? And they're hiding that. No, let's not go into this conspiracy theories things. Like, I mean, that is like ridiculous. They don't know. And even if Noorduin in this article, he mentions some alternative readings. I mean, Tautsma is something that we will heavily correct, but they don't see it. I didn't see it for years. I totally feel that. I'm there. The point is, of course, when someone like me makes the case so hard over and over again, shows so many examples of impossible things, that you might just reach out and say like, okay, can we maybe talk with, and then just see. I would love to talk to Noorduin, by the way. Really, would love to be on. We can record a podcast and we will. I mean, it would be cool. I mean, it's like, but yeah, we have to be open and we will see. But given the fact that he was considered to be one of the best pianists alive in his day, he could have replied in the same way that Vladimir Horowitz allegedly did when asked why he played certain passages so fast, because I can. Yeah, but the point is we cannot. And if we cannot play 23 notes per second, then Karl Czerny cannot play 23 notes a second. And by the way, Karl Czerny, he might have been a very good student by Beethoven, but the poor guy was teaching from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. in the evening, and then he was composing until midnight. He had 7 desks. On each desk was like he was composing something, and he worked on 7 different compositions simultaneously. He just filled in the first page, then he went to the second composition, composed another page, and then the third, and so on. And by the time he was at number 7, the ink of number 1 was dry, and then his servant would have turned the page so he could continue. And that did he for 5 hours a day, after also teaching 12 hours for 40 years. When would he practice to become that famous, unbelievable Superman that could play all of that, and in spite of teaching 40 years, 8 hours a day, not realizing that his metronome marks didn't make any sense at all? Sometimes, I mean, if I find that butter in the fridge, but I feel stupid, but I feel sometimes tired going through this. I mean, and again, this is not personal. It's not on Noorduin. I kind of understand, but also kind of not understand. Guys, it's not so hard. Just read your own text. Read your own text and you see that it doesn't make any sense. And so now we have as a conclusion, granted, great. We have the assumption, we have like the positioning is clear. That's the problem. Our book also will start with the largest section will be the problems are real. There is no escape. I will hammer that point down until everybody has to accept, yes, we do have a problem. It's important. Noorduin in a way did the same thing. Do at the end say like, I don't have, it's throwing the hand like the towel in the ring, you know. I don't have a solution. Probably Czerny could have done it because he was the best pianist ever. Point. Great article, published, peer-reviewed. I mean, that's really the level we're talking about. Every time people go into the territory of metronomics, it doesn't get any better than this. It's objectively written, but it is like the only conclusion you can say, like, how could this ever been accepted and published? It's unbelievable. But that's what happens when you dive into this matter seriously. Therefore, Noorduin is an intelligent guy, but he was stuck in this single beat reading, and then you come to such absurd conclusions like, yeah, probably Czerny just could have done that and he didn't realize that nobody else could do it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, what can we conclude of that? Go to our Beethoven symphonies. That's the best conclusion I can give. Seriously. I mean, this is what we do here. We not only complain about research that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the conclusion, the points that Noorduin makes are very interesting, but the conclusions, that's not the only thing we do. We also make recordings. Alberto is now in the midst of recording the full Beethoven keyboard works, all variations, everything, chronologically, more or less. The first box will be launched in the Kickstarter somewhere in the midst of October. Stay tuned for that. We have an email list if you want to check that out and be part of that. There will be 3 boxes like this. I mean, this is 10 CD boxes with a huge booklet. I mean, everything of the project. This is actually a summary of the big book. The big book, of course, someone of you wrote in the comment section, don't keep teasing us, just publish that book. It's so much work. But we are making progress step by step. The book will be coming. Also working in the case you're interested on a huge course on notation, which starts from the Beethoven symphonies, in which you will learn to understand what the tempi are that Beethoven gave to a certain piece, notation-wise, the time signature, the Italian tempo word combination. We do have the metronome marks, and actually we can apply them. That's cool. And so we can learn from that. And there will be like a premium course. I think we will end up like close to 90 videos, maybe 15 to 20 hours of material, but there will be shortcuts. Also, stay tuned. And there's the email list. I'm not using the email list often. I should do it more, but I don't have time for that. But when I have something to say or announce something, I'm using your names or your emails there, and I can send it out. There are 1,200 people right now already there, which is insane. So get your name on the email list and you will be notified when all of that comes. See the service. And we are planning to do cool things like creating an ecosystem around all the information that we provide, the courses, the recordings, but also next year, I hope really to create a membership site where we can take you each and every month through several lessons, work together, learn how to make fingerings and works by Bach, later music, try to understand the score, read the score together, and then share it for each other and cool stuff like that. That's all coming. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.